Okay, welcome back to Spirit Work 101, and I am doing another short video talking about different types of spirits. And when I say short, I mean short. I really want you all to research on your own. Really quick though, I have to say, and I may have said it before, but I'll say it again, please start slow and safe. I might make spirit work sound easy. You can jump into working with anybody at any time, and I don't mean to make it sound that way. I've been doing different things for most of my life. I've been on this path for my whole life, and doing spirit work, literally inviting, invoking, evoking deities and angels and stuff, at least since I got out of high school, which was 8 years ago. So I've been doing this for a long time, and I've learned a lot through trial and error, and not all of it pleasant, a lot of it unpleasant or very strong. And inviting energies into your life literally invites them into your life, just like inviting a physical person or starting a new job exposes you to new people, to new ideas, to new energies, but it also exposes you to new responsibilities, to new desires, to more push and pull in life. As always, I suggest getting to know yourself first and foremost, getting to know not just you, your triggers, your fears, your desires, kind of getting a baseline on your emotions, taking a couple years to see what you're drawn to, not just a couple months, but a couple years to see, oh, I'm interested in astrology in this way, and I'm interested in crystals over here, and then this deity, and then this pantheon. And that doesn't mean it's going to happen exactly that way for you, but what I've learned, and I'm sure, our parents and grandparents have said this to all of us over time, is that nothing beats experience. Nothing beats taking your time and learning from experience. Let it integrate, let it settle. You don't need to rush. There's no race here. It's just you and your soul evolving over time. And it's phenomenal to be interested in a place to I don't want to say quicken, but to make deeper, wider, faster the channels of your growth. But remember that this is not, again, we're talking about a scale of eternity done in lapses of human lifetimes with little in-between patches. You have time. So get to know yourself, get to know what healing that you need, and be sure to reevaluate that regularly. Get a journal, figure out your interests, get to know your family stories, religious and spiritual background, geographic background, get to know your ancestors to the best of your ability, ancestry.com, talk to your grandparents, spend time with your elders and the elders in your surrounding area if you can, obviously COVID safe. I don't know, maybe there's a pen pal situation or people, I'm sure people need actually company older folks do, so phone calls or letters. Really getting grounded. Secondly, developing your personal spiritual practice before you get into exploratory spirit work, mixing different magical systems and magical works together. It's really, really important that you have a relationship with God. And it doesn't mean I don't know, I have spent a lot of time worrying about sounding preachy, but if you watch my videos anyway, then it doesn't matter. You need a relationship with God. I don't care what name you call God by. I don't care what your relationship consists of. You need to have a higher power. Even if you just call them higher power and you are a little skeptical, you're like, hey, HP, listen, I need you to cover me. That's your higher power. I don't care if it's cosmic goo. You need to see a higher power and have a relationship with it. You need to know that it's a part of you, within and without, because everything is within and without us. You need to know that you and that higher power have a divine, personal, sacred relationship, and that you are sovereign in your own being. And honestly, I would not advise anybody who does not believe that there is a higher power to do any of this work. You could be agnostic all day and be like, I think that there's something, but I don't know what. But if you don't believe there's anything, or if you see these things just as concepts, and yes, in a second, I would say concepts can be, personified. People do pour so much energy into something that they can kind of form a spirit, an egregore, or a thought form. But what I'm talking about is being caught off guard because you invite a spirit doing some kind of spirit work and you don't really fully believe that it exists. I'm bringing these things up in myself. Yeah, you might be cis, but also you're bringing it up from somewhere else. You are calling both parts of the mirror to be present in the dance. It's all real. It's all very, very real. So I don't have my hair wrapped because I just dyed it and I'm letting it sit with a lot of conditioner. That's why it's not wrapped up. But there's really two parties coming. There's really a spirit coming to work, and you need to have a relationship with a higher power to make sure everybody behaves accordingly. I'm not a fan of the school of thought of calling spirits up and doing all this extra, like I'm doing this huge cleanse and I'm like controlling them and I've got 19 boxes and squares and sigils and chants. I don't do all that. I am sovereign in my works, and that's enough. God and I know that. And I do, my invocations and evocations under the love of God. And, when I send everybody away, it's with the love of the Creator between us. But when you don't have that relationship, things can run you. Things can try to run you. Shit can come through. Like, I always want people to be practicing safely and smartly. Because, again, anything that you have happening in your heart and mind can influence whatever's happening magically and spiritually. So, last point, finally, is outside of the relationship with God being developed, really genuinely practice your personal practice. If you're Catholic, really get to know about Catholic faith, really get to know not just like the dogma and fucking dictatorship energy around shit, but get to know some of the saints that you're drawn to, where they came from, what the cultural stuff was at the time, what was the energy around them being canonized. Get to know if you are, if you're Wiccan, really get to know the Sabbaths. Get to know the energies of the Lord and Lady and the dance of them together throughout the seasons. Whatever it is that you purport to believe and purport to practice, get to know it. And, if you fall back and come back and do that little spiral dance in between, it's okay. To an extent. If you really want to be deep into spirit work and stuff, then the it's okay statement was not for you. Us folks, we gotta do shit, make the commitment and really do it. But really learn about your practice, because there's so much depth in a lot of practices, and when you get to work on that relationship with the Creator and with other spirits, you'll find a lot there. Basically, I kind of operate, even though I mix a lot of systems, and I show that, I'm talking about it for this reason. I show that, on my social media, I use planetary magic, and I work with the angels, and I work with, like, fallen angels, and yada, yada, yada. But I've really taken the time to develop that, and most of the spirits that I work with tend to come from roughly one region, from biblical time periods and around before then. They're not quite as mixed up as folks might think they are. So getting to know the stories behind what makes up your spiritual court, your pantheon, your group, your practice is very important. So that's a key message for Spirit Work 101. Devote yourself genuinely to what it is you say you are devoted to, and really learn about that, and learn the basics, the grounding, the regular prayers, what makes you comfortable. Fancy stuff is fancy stuff and it's fun, but you need to do, the basic addition and subtraction before you get to, like, long division or whatever, before you get to calculus. like start with the beginning, start with the building blocks. What is this doing? Oh well. I say that to say, there's a lot of different types of spirits out there, and your spiritual court is comprised of different types of spirits, and I'm not sure we've talked about this before. So a spiritual court is like your personal spiritual family, your spirit house, like your group. So your ancestors, your dead, your gods and guides and angels, this is your spiritual court. And so your ancestors are your blood relatives, your blood ancestors, grandma, grandpa, great-grandma, great-grandpa, great-aunts, great-uncles, etc., etc. Your dead are people, my understanding is that they're folks that are not blood ancestors, blood relatives, but other dead. pardon me, when it comes to things like adopted, you know, people or folks that was like you know that they were like blood, to me, I count them as ancestors. I know that they're not blood ancestors, but to me, because maybe I knew them in life, that's very different than being my dead. So I have that little middle distinction, like these people are still ancestors. But your dead are folks like, yeah, like maybe you didn't know them in life. Maybe it was your great grandma's like best friend and they both passed on, but great grandma's best friend was there for, you know, your grandma's life and some of your mom's life. Like they were involved, and so they watch the family. That's still a guardian. It's still somebody who cares about you, especially if the families are still involved. You know what I mean? Like folks still check in on each other during the holidays. I was a nurse aide for a long time. There's a small number of people that I consider my dead, because I took care of them up until they died, and they've made themselves known to me. So like I include them in prayers, or sometimes I, you know, leave them stuff, you know, stuff like that. So your ancestors and dead, though, that they were human, usually. Your ancestors and dead that I'm talking about in this way, where you're living human spirits. You can have ancestors like beyond that, because we do come from star stuff and so many more elements and dimensions than we know. So you might have ancestors that have connections to particular planets or to pantheons or something, and that might come up in a divination and in an Akashic record reading, you know, what have you. So there's that. What else? Angels, we've talked about in other videos. Angels might be in your spiritual court. Anything associated with you by like namesake, location, ancestral, like spiritual practices. These are beings that might want to be in your court and might naturally be aligned with you. To my understanding, also, your court isn't necessarily everybody that you have the potential of being aligned with, but it's like your spiritual family that's living like in the other realms, and your spiritual family maybe that's here, the ancestors and dead that you work with, your benevolent, honorable, loving ancestors and dead, and the deities or angels, you know, whomever, that are loving and supportive of you as well. So that's what your spiritual court is. We've talked a little bit about, you know, ancestor altars and offerings, but getting to know what your court likes, making sure they have their own spaces, if you have regular practice, is important. We've talked about that too, making sure, you know, things have their own spaces to exist. So yeah, that's what your spiritual court is comprised of. And I wanted to talk about types of spirits a very little bit, and I really mean a very little bit. So we have gods and goddesses, which are like a male or a female deity, basically, and there are also hermaphroditic deities. I don't know if I said that right. So there are different types of deities out there. Like Zeus or Jupiter, we think of as being like a sovereignty, like Hecate, a sovereignty, Isis is a sovereignty. They are literal queens and kings of kingdoms on top of being a deity. They sometimes represent something like expansiveness. Zeus and, you know, Jupiter, tied to the planet Jupiter. They have to do with expansiveness, with higher learning, with spiritual expansion. And deities also tend to play into archetypes after a while. They, you know, have a deep, like, connection to mythology. Sticking with the Greek, Zeus was a fucking player. Aphrodite is known for being passionate and tempestuous and, like, absolutely beautiful and, like, just, like, the goddess of sexuality and love. Apollo, also kind of a player, but radiant and phenomenal with music. So we get archetypes from deities, or deities help represent archetypes. We don't get them from the deities. Anyway. So we have our deities. They are literal gods. They rule over something. They are in control of, like, thunder and lightning, of storms, of fresh water, of communication. They rule over a set of things or a particular thing, and so yeah, they have control over that. Deities in general, like gods and goddesses, are usually imagined with human characteristics, with jealousy, with anger, with, like, falling in love, having desire. So not only do they help us understand our world, our seasons through myth and their interactions, but they help us to see ourselves reflected in the divine. And humans like that. Again, we like to see ourselves. We like to understand things. One of my favorite myths in terms of understanding something is like, you know, Demeter and her absolute grief over Persephone causing winter. And people being like, hey, motherfucker, you gotta bring Persephone back somehow. We need to eat. Like, boom. A mother's grief left the world barren. And there's so much there. So not only does the myth explain, like, hey, here's how the season itself is happening, but also we can look at how mothers produce and nurture. And when they're upset, we're not receiving. So it's not just on a literal sense, but on a metaphorical sense. So deities do that. The Lawa and Orisha in Vodou and Ifa, I don't know, because I'm not initiated into either tradition. I try really hard to speak on them like in a limited and respectful manner. So I know the Orisha and the Loa to be literal forces of nature, and their stories, their Pataki, tell of like human experience, the development of the world, how things came into being, why we do what we do the way we do it. So they're forces of nature, but they're also divinities. They are sometimes like humans who were absolutely phenomenal and like were raised up and have been elevated into, you know, or basically deified, and sometimes they were not. They were literal divine beings that were brought forth from, you know, the creator to govern over something. But we get to know them through their Pataki and their stories expressed through their children. So if you're interested in ATRs or DTRs and you learn about Ifa or Ifa and the Orisa or the Loa in Vodou, you would learn that, you know, like one of them may have your head or your feet, and so you'll have characteristics of them. And so when I talk about doing like initiation and dedication to deities, it's very similar, at least for my understanding. Like I said, not just the fact that their stories are represented, but you take on those characteristics. When you receive that deity, you take on those characteristics. You take on some of their energy, their desires, etc. So the Orisha and Loa are their own category. To me, they are very present, very real, very deep. I don't know a quarter of what there is to know about them, but, you know, I advise that if you practice any of those traditions, get to know about the Orisha outside of the ones that you're interested in. Or if you want to study any of those traditions, get to know the Orisha or Loa outside of the one that you think fits you. It's not about what you think fits you. It's about the medicine that your soul needs. So get to know that. And think about that when working with any deities, any angels, any gods or goddesses, any tradition. It's not about what you want, what about looks aesthetically pleasing, what's cool. It's about what you need. Angels we talked about in a totally separate video, but they exist. They're spiritual beings that are here to assist humanity. They're messengers and agents of God. Angels, you know, have correspondences to various planets, days of the week, secret names of God, etc., etc. They can be called, reached, worked with, regardless of your religious affiliation. Demons are a whole nother book. So demon is a term that has changed over time. The traditional Greek, like, daemon did not suggest a particularly evil spirit. It simply suggested a spirit, a divine being, possibly the spirit of a person. So it wasn't like an evil connotation. Demon, as we know it today, obviously has a very evil connotation, heavily influenced by Christianity. But that's not to say evil spirits don't exist. Evil spirits absolutely do exist. It's just not everything listed as a demon is one. I recommend, you know, studying that as well. One of my favorite examples is that the goddess Tiamat is considered a demon in some circles, and she's one of the most like primordial, literal like mother goddesses. Like her body became the earth. So there are like gods and goddesses in my like experience so far, especially goddesses who get labeled as dark or demonic because they were very independent, their sexuality was like open and free, they owned themselves, maybe they were goddesses of transformation, of death, of war, something like that. So it doesn't mean that they're necessarily evil, but that they definitely have expressed far more than just cookie cutter, like plain, boring, empty religion. But anyway, demons do exist. Evil spirits do exist. Be very mindful of what you're working with. Even like, I've done work with the, you know, demons of the Goetia. I don't know if I love that pronunciation, but of the Goetia. And like, I didn't mind it. It worked out just fine. I would recommend it to a handful of people if they're okay with it, but it's not something I want for my regular everyday practice, because even if those entities aren't evil, I think it opens the door. So when I talk about demons, I do it partially because there are spirits that have been labeled as demons and aren't, and it's to rectify that. It's to bring notice to the different facets of beings. For example, Lilith is amazing, 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 but there are elements of Lilith that will scratch somebody's eyes out simply because, and that's not a joke, that's like, she be like that. And those are different facets of a being, and over time, like, you know, spirits blend together. Like, getting to know the different elements of something is very important. I cannot stress it enough. Getting to know the names of something, I cannot stress enough. Getting to know if something has multiple names and remembering them and greeting them with those names and using those names as a checkpoint for, you know, confirmation and discernment, I cannot stress enough. Please do it. Please. Please, please. So we have Orisha, we have Loa, we have gods and goddesses and angels, ancestors and dead. There are, of course, like ghosts and spirits. Sometimes people don't pass on all the way. Sometimes they have unfinished business, or there's like a strong energy echo from, you know, an event imprinting energy there. Battlefields, houses that have had abuse in them. Medical facilities sometimes have that energy. The only medical facility I've been in that didn't have that energy was a Catholic hospital, and that shit scared me because it had no energy. It was like neutral in an unsettling way. So there's an abundance of spirits out there. I probably oh god, I haven't even touched on all the other ones. There's elementals, there's fairies. Elementals are things like salamanders, brownies, dryads. They're little literal spirits of like the elements of water, of wind, sylphs, things like that. There's an absolute abundance of spirits out there. And while I originally wanted to make a lot of super in-depth videos for you guys, Spirit instead was like, no, you have to make them shorter and have people look on their own. So, with that said, I have a couple books to suggest. Oh, okay. Because this is the last, like, installment of the Spirit Work 101, and then we're going to get into different gods and different angels on an individual level, getting to know them from information that we can all find on Google and in books, but also adding, hopefully, some channeled interview spins onto it. So, first recommendation for books that I have is by Judica Illes, I think the last name. Judica Illes, Judica Isles, I'm not sure. But it's Encyclopedia of Spirits. And it is a huge book. It was around $30-something, I think, when I bought it at Barnes & Noble several years ago. She has maybe even 5 different encyclopedias out. I currently own 2 of them because I gave one away, but the Encyclopedia of Spirits I cannot recommend enough. She has the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, which has a white cover, and the Encyclopedia of like 5,000 Spells, which has, it looks a lot like this, but with a purple binding. But this one has the ultimate guide to the magic of fairies, genies, demons, ghosts, gods, and goddesses. So Jinn, we didn't talk about Jinn. So yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's ridiculous. It's a literal encyclopedia of spirits from all over the world. I cannot pronounce half of the names in here. Every time I find an obscure spirit or hear about one, I turn around and it's in that book. I've had it for several years, very much worth the little $30 investment. This book, Grimoire for the Green Witch by Anne Mora. is one of my all-time favorite books, like, ever. Ever. It's one of the first books I spent money on for witchcraft for myself when I ventured beyond Scott Cunningham as I was leaving my my early Wicca phase. So it says The Complete Book of Shadows. I actually do not own any of Anne Mora's other books. I know she's a very popular author in the witchcraft pagan community. I know that she has a well-loved series on green witchcraft. I've debated buying it over the years. But this grimoire is absolutely phenomenal. Not only does it talk about the Sabbats, but it has lists of dark gods and goddesses. It has lists of planetary spirits, including the, let me see if I can find it for you guys really quick. The planetary intelligences and seals. There's just a huge amount of rituals in here. Consecration of the dark aspect tool, light aspect tool. So, well, it was originally, I think, intended for, like, green witchcraft and heavily influenced by pagan paths. If you read the book, you'll be able to see that she really knows her shit. She really practices her shit, and it's stuff that she has developed. And I recommend this book not just for spirit work, but for all work, because it's one that you can develop your practice with as well. Like I said, I've had this practice book for a long time, probably 7 or 8 years now, because that's another one I would have gotten fresh out of high school. And as my practice has developed, I have found more and more and more value in this book, actually, than I initially did. So I recommend that one, Grimoire for the Green Witch by Anne Mora. Okay, and I only have 2 other recommendations. These are, like, I'll have other recommendations as time goes on. I don't have specific, I don't like giving you recipe books. I could, there's the Complete Book of Correspondences published by Llewellyn is phenomenal. It has deities, it has all of the astrology shit and angels and minerals and crystals and herbs and all that stuff. But again, it's like, it's even less than a recipe book. It's simply an encyclopedia again. So one that I really recommend that was a gift from my best friend that I love is You Are a Goddess. And this is by Sophie Bashford. You can follow her on Instagram. She's super cool. This book journeys you through, I think, 9 temples, or I don't know. I think 9 temples, 9 goddesses, or 9 sets of them, because the Sisters of Avalon are one temple, but it's more than one goddess. But it's really like I don't know, it's a combination of memoir for her, but it's also you moving through like these meditations and these archetypes. So Kali Ma is in here, Isis is in here, Lilith, Hecate, so many. Mother Mary is in here. Like, I just really recommend it. Because to me, this journey should be about your emotional growth, your spiritual growth. This book is actually interactive, working with these energies and working with some of these deities. And so if you're already working with these goddesses, like on an actual spirit work level, this opens it up 10 times more. And if you're not, if you're just the type of person that's like, I don't really believe in these different faces, this is still a great read for healing. And I think for men too, or very masculine people, because it's focused on the sacred feminine. Pardon me. Oof. I just think it's really good. We all have a womb space. We all have feminine and masculine energy, so that's super worth it. Finally, a book that I really, really, really recommend for spirit work, for exploration with yourself, and for tarot is Mother Peace. And this is not the deck book, but this is a separate book, although I honestly really love it for the deck, and I love it for other tarot decks. Well, the imagery discussed is specific to the Mother Peace deck. The archetypes that it discusses and the imagery that it discusses helps you understand archetypes in general more. And if you are a diviner or a spirit worker or just somebody interested, the more you can study archetypes and mythology, the better equipped you'll be for spirit work and any spiritual journey. They all really, really go together. Let me see. What else? I feel like I'm supposed to be giving you guys like tools. Looking for Mary is another phenomenal book. I just finished reading it. I've been reading it on and off for a couple years. It's by Beverly D'Onofrio. I very obviously have a lot of Catholic influence in my personal practice. Even my hoodoo is very influenced by Catholicism, just because that has been a lot of my own journey. So I recommend looking for Mary, whether or not you are Catholic or Catholic adjacent. I recommend, let's see, that's it for my recommendations right now. Read those books. Read other books that you're drawn to, though. Just read, explore, read articles. Don't be afraid to Google every combination of keywords you can think of. And that is it for spirits. Okay, nope, that didn't work. But that's it for spirits. I love you guys, and I think I might bust out one more video. We might get the Hermes, Mercury, or Meha video done today. And after that, we can move into more. So, anyway, I love you. Bye.